Hello, everyone. Welcome back to KXAN Live and happy New Year's Eve. I'm your anchor, Esmeralda Zamora, and today we have our space-based segment back again after the holidays. And with me to do this is our KXAN reporter, Eric Henriksen. Eric, thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's New Year's Eve. I keep forgetting that the year ends in just a few hours. It's so weird. It's throwing me off.
2025.
I'm not ready for it. 2025 is here. It's the year of stuff.
The year of stargazing and exploration.
Let's talk about last year was NASA's big sun year. It's the helioscience year is what they call it. We had the eclipse. They had a solar probe reach the sun just a couple days ago. It's the closest probe we've ever sent, closest object we've ever sent to the sun. Reached and did some scans there. So it was a big year for the sun. This year doesn't really have like an overarching theme. There's just some really cool stuff happening from exploration to going to the moon a little bit, and Austin is going to have a touch on the moon this year, which is pretty cool. So yeah.
So let's start off with the first news on the list. You have first things first is, I'm looking at your article here, but you were talking about Artemis?
Yeah, let's talk about Artemis. So Artemis is the current NASA program taking us to the moon. And part of Artemis this year is kind of preparations for Artemis 2. And that's Artemis 2 is going to launch next year. So Artemis 2 will bring humans back into orbit of the moon for the first time since the 70s. It's a big step in the program. It's step 1, or kind of like step 2, because there was Artemis 1, but that was an unmanned probe. This is the first step with humans involved to the moon, eventually going to Artemis 3, which will bring us to the moon. And that was scheduled for 2026, but now Artemis 2 is in 2026, so my guess.
2025 it is.
2025 we'll have the preps. 2026 we'll have the orbit. 2027 maybe landing.
Oof.
But I'm guessing probably 2028 will be the earliest we'll send humans to the moon. So there's going to be some delay. But that's humans. We're actually sending stuff to the moon now, which is really cool. One of the really cool things is based right here in the Austin area in Cedar Park is Firefly Aerospace. And later this month, can we see a month yet? And in just a few hours, then later this month, they're going to launch their own lunar lander to the moon as part of NASA's CLIPS program. And this will bring a bunch of instruments to the moon. And this lunar lander called Blue Ghost 1 will land in one of the craters on the moon, bringing a bunch of scientific experiments as part of this ongoing deal they have with NASA to bring experiments to the moon. This is the first of at least 2 missions planned in the near future and bring a lot of cool experiments. So that's Firefly Aerospace. They're based in Cedar Park. We visited them a bunch of times. You're looking at the renderings right now of what that looks like, what their lander looks like. I've seen that lander up close. It's pretty cool. I definitely nerded out a little bit. I'm like, oh, there's a lunar lander right there, right? But it was really cool to see this and to know that we're taking experiments right from Austin to the moon as part of this program. And this launches in mid-January.
So pretty close.
Mid to late January, somewhere in there, depending on any delays or anything like that. So it's coming up pretty quick, and we're going to see that happen very, very shortly. I'm really excited to get us Austin's fingerprint on the moon in the new era of space travel. And what's really cool, I was reading about this the other day. So we have Artemis 2, we have the CLIPS missions with Firefly Aerospace participating in those. And then we're going to build a Gateway, which is going to be the new space station that's going to orbit the moon. And we're going to use that to kind of buoy ourselves to Mars. And this is the next step. So it's really cool to see these kind of incremental steps happening in relatively rapid succession. You look back at the 60s where we got to the moon in less than a decade and then hung out there for another decade. Well, now we're back. We're putting our fingerprint again on the moon, and we're going to have a permanent settlement there and then a permanent settlement in orbit, and eventually. So keep your eye out for new stories as we get closer and closer to these big events, because we're getting closer every single day to man's return to the moon, and it's pretty wild to see that.
And you've talked about this Firefly craft before and how it's related to the Cedar Park.
Right.
The Cedar Park. So are you going to be speaking with anyone who is going to be involved in this this year?
Spoilers, but yeah. I am setting something up right now. We're going to schedule something right after the new year. So I'm really excited about that, to chat with them about what their anticipation level is like. I've visited them a few times. They have a facility in Cedar Park, which is really cool, and then another facility in Briggs, just a little northwest of Cedar Park. And that's where they test the rockets. I got to visit that facility when they were building these new larger rockets out there that have these lasers and stuff cutting the rockets. It was really, really cool. I got to see the whole facility, including where they test the rockets and they fire them off. It's a neat facility. It's in the middle of Briggs. Briggs is a small town, just like I said, northwest of Austin. And Cedar Park is where they're mainly based. So it's a cool company. I really enjoy visiting when I get to hang out there. I definitely my nerd flag flies high when I'm on the property. I'm look at all this cool stuff. Yeah, like I said, I've seen this lander up close. They were putting together, say 7-8 months ago.
How big is it?
It's pretty good size. Maybe the size of like a minivan and a half.
A minivan
like
and
wide.
a half?
Yeah, it's square and then it's pretty tall. But it'll carry a bunch of scientific as part of this CLIPS mission. There's a bunch on board. It's going to land in this. I'm going to try to pronounce this. This is Latin or maybe Greek. I think it's Greek. Mare Crisium. And that's one of the craters on the moon. It's actually, if you look at the moon, if you close your eyes for a second, everybody, and visualize the moon, you have that dark set of rings kind of right in the middle as you're looking at it. They're bigger, or not rings, but craters, dark craters. And then the upper right is like a smaller crater that's just towards the edge of the moon's horizon. And that's where they're going to be landing in that crater. And it's kind of north of where Apollo 11 landed in that kind of area. So these craters, what's interesting about these craters is some of them could contain ice, and that means water. They think that's mainly on the poles, and that's one of the places Artemis 3 is going to head, is look down there for ice. We have more missions planned to head down there and look for ice. This one, not on the poles, but in a visible spot, you'll be able to see where it lands. Just, go outside, look at the moon. When it's full, upper right, kind of right above that central line of dark craters is where this crater is. That's where you're going to be landing for this mission here.
Yeah. And we also, I know that you wrote in your article, there's at least 20 maiden flights scheduled for 2025 and 4 rockets built in the U.S. scheduled for 2025.
Yeah, one of them is Blue Origin's New Glenn. The other one's Rocket Lab's Neutron. So we have a bunch of rocket launches planned this year and a bunch of new rockets launch. So we're going to see a bunch of rocket launches every month. I think the next one I saw scheduled is in January. It's like a Saturday, January like 7th or 8th or something like that. I think it's the first Saturday in the month is what I have it on my calendar as. So that's the first one scheduled. But obviously these move all the time because of weather and just other events. So keep an eye out. Everything we listed in this article is planned missions.
But can always be canceled.
All of them can be canceled. They can move at any time. I remember I was sitting in the studio watching one a few weeks ago, and we're sitting there watching going, is it going to launch? Is it going to launch? Down to the second. Because you don't know. They can cancel it like that. If things look if there's a technical error or, weather issues.
Anything can change that.
Right.
Now, we do have some humans still in space, and they were supposed to come back in 2024, was it? That they were scheduled originally?
It was supposed to be in June. So the stranded astronauts we've been talking about last few months, Suni Williams, Butch Wilmore, they were part of Boeing's Starliner missions, and the ship went up there, and there were some technical issues, and they were a little concerned about bringing these 2 astronauts back. They were supposed to be up there just a few days, and that extended to weeks, months, and now months and months.
Months and months.
So they arrived in June. They were originally supposed to, not originally, but the revised plan was to bring them back in January. That got pushed to February, and now it's been pushed to March.
Yep.
So June to March. Honestly, it's a long trip in space. I'd be down for it. They get some new experiments out of it. It's not like they're just hanging out. They're working.
They spent their first Christmas up there.
Yeah, they spent their first Christmas, their New Year's today.
Thanksgiving.
Which they'll get to spend several times because the International Space Station orbits the planet several times a day. So they'll get to see so many different New Years. As the hours tick on, they'll get to see several. But their planned return is now in March. That's going to be aboard SpaceX's Dragon capsule as part of Crew 10. Crew 10 is going to come up. They're going to ride down with Crew 9. And then Crew 10 will be up there for a few months, and then Crew 11, this is the next set of astronauts, will join the International Station. Crew 10 will then return, and Crew 11 will remain through the rest of the year if the schedule maintains. So we'll see what happens. It does. But the plan is, March. And so Crew 10, I think, had reduced it by 2 seats. They originally 4 astronauts. Now it's down to 2 astronauts are going up, and 4 are coming down, including the 2 astronauts who've been stuck up there all this time. I understand it's frustrating for their family and for them probably to be stuck, but also
great experience.
What an adventure, right? Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
To get to hang out there for that long.
And we also had several eclipses this year that we got to see, lunar and solar.
Yes.
But what about meteor showers for 2025?
So the only meteor showers on our schedule this year are kind of the ones that are typically. So the Quantrids is January 3rd. It's going to peak, and these are the peak dates, by the way. If you want to see them, this is the best time to see them. The Quantrids is going to quadrantids. I can never say that right.
Quadrantid.
Quadrantids. It's January 3rd. That's when it's going to peak. The Lyrids is April 21st through 22nd. The Eta Aquarids is May 6th through 7th. Delta Aquarids, July 28th, 29th. The Draconids, October 8th and 9th. The Leonids, I guess that's named after Leah. November 17th and 18th. Some of these are named after the comets that pass by, too. Also where they look like they're coming from constellation-wise. They're all going to peak at midnight except for the Draconids. That's going to peak in the morning hours.
So we have pretty much all year you'll have an opportunity.
Yeah, and we'll come back before each of these. These were the Quantarids, that's this weekend. But the rest of them, we'll check in with y'all and give you kind of a heads up to say, hey, there's a meteor shower this weekend. There's only one eclipse. It's a solar eclipse. It's going to pass over Maine. And it's not a total solar eclipse, it's a partial. And it's a real partial. It's just like a crescent. It's not much of anything. But that'll pass over Maine and Canada, Newfoundland, and I think Greenland. And it'll pass over that area. But again, that one's really brief, and it's just a sliver. It's something you would barely notice if you're not wearing the proper eclipse glasses. So that's the reason we're not talking about that eclipse this year. The next one will be 2026. And that one is in Spain.
Barcelona. So not even here in Texas.
Not even here. You can see it in Iceland, and I'm trying to plan a trip and trick my husband into taking me to Iceland to see an eclipse. We'll see what he says. Although the weather might be a little more cloudy in Iceland. Maybe Spain's the way to go.
Spain sounds nice.
Spain sounds nice. I've never been, so it'd be a great trip just to see an eclipse. Well, not just to see the eclipse. That would be my reason, but we'll see. Maybe I can
find some things to do once you get there.
Right. Well, we'll have some reasons to go. Spain's cool, I hear.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Well, if anyone is interested in figuring out or learning about what is happening in space for 2025, Eric has created this article on our website, kxan.com, and it is labeled Stargazing and Exploration in 2025. And all of the details. Is there something that we missed that you have on here?
The only other thing we have is some science missions. You can learn more about those in the article. There's a few that we're launching this year. The one I'm most interested in is the Sentinel-6B, and it's going to monitor global sea level. It's going to replace the Michael Freilich, which was in service a few years ago, still is in service today. So they have a tendency to rotate these out to continue the mission. I've covered a few of those over the years, and this is another one. That one's really interesting to help us monitor climate change and how it's impacting our seas. That's going to launch later this year. A couple of the other ones are pretty neat. But yeah, read about them. I have a lot of information in the article that you can check out. That some like little nerdy details if you're really interested. But yeah,
pictures and all that good stuff.
Some cool stuff. You can learn more about Firefly's Blue Ghost 1 mission and what they're bringing on, the experiments they're bringing with them onto the moon. And yeah, a lot of cool stuff in there. Yeah, check it out. It's a fun read. I made a fun read just before the new year. Like let's look ahead to space a little bit.
Yeah, look ahead to the new year in space.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Eric. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
And that's all we have today on the Space Space. Remember, we have a couple more streams happening later today. If you could join us here on KXN Live, we'd love to have you. Thanks so much for watching.